you know there is an African community living in India whose ancestors arrived over 1,000 years ago? This is such a fascinating story, so stay with me. My name is Noreen and this is Real Africa Stories. Today I want to tell you the story about one of the most overlooked African diaspora stories in the world. Because when people talk about the African diaspora, most think of slavery across the Atlantic, the Americas, the Caribbean, Brazil. But Africa's history didn't only move west, it also moved east, across the Indian Ocean. And that's where we meet the Siddis, an African community living in India and Pakistan today. Yes, Africans in India. The Siddis are descendants of East Africans, mainly Bantu peoples from places like modern Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, Ethiopia and Somalia. So how did Africans end up thousands of miles away in South Asia? The answer begins long before European colonization. For over 1,000 years, the Indian Ocean was one of the busiest trade networks on Earth. African sailors, merchants and travelers crossed between East Africa, Arabia, Persia and India regularly. This was not unusual. In fact, Africans were already arriving in Indian ports as early as the 17th century. Some came freely as traders and sailors, but others arrived through something many people rarely learn about: the Indian Ocean slave trade. A system that lasted longer than the Atlantic trade and connected Africa to Asia and the Middle East. Africans were brought to India as servants, laborers, and soldiers. But here's the part most people don't expect. Their story did not always end in oppression. Some Africans in India rose to extraordinary power. Let me tell you about one man, Malik Ambar. He was born in Ethiopia, captured as a child, sold into slavery, taken across the Indian Ocean. By every historical expectation, his story should have ended there. Instead, Malik Ambar became one of the most powerful men in India. He rose through military ranks, became Prime Minister of the Ahmednagar Sultanate, defeated Mughal imperial armies, and introduced advanced irrigation and city planning systems still studied today. An African man, once enslaved, defending an Indian kingdom against an empire. History rarely tells you that story. And Malik Ambar was not alone. Africans known historically as Habshis from the Al-Habsha, meaning Abyssinia or Ethiopia, served as generals, governors and royal guards across Indian courts. They were often trusted because they had no local clan loyalties. Some became kings. Yes, African rulers in India. And the most famous example was the Siddi state of Janjira, an island fortress off India's west coast ruled by African leaders for centuries. European colonial powers tried repeatedly to conquer it. They failed. The African-led kingdom survived until Indian independence in 1947. Let that sink in. An African dynasty ruling a part of India into the modern era. Over generations, these African communities settled permanently. Today, Siddis live mainly in Gujarat, Karnataka and Goa. They speak local Indian languages. Some practice Islam, others Hinduism, others Christianity. They are fully Indian, but traces of Africa remain. In music, in rhythm, in dance traditions like Damal, where drumming patterns strongly resemble East African ceremonies, their identity became something unique. Not African, not Indian, but Afro-Indian. So why have most people never heard of them? Because global history has been told through an Atlantic lens. We learned about slavery to the Americas, but rarely about African movement into Asia. The Siddis challenged the idea that Africans only appear in history as victims. They were sailors, generals, advisors, rulers, nation builders. They remind us that Africans were global long before globalization existed. Today, many Siddi communities face economic hardship and social marginalization, but their African heritage is visible, yet often misunderstood within modern racial systems. But their history tells a much bigger story. Africa was never isolated. Africa was connected to the world across deserts, across oceans, across centuries. Because the African diaspora does not only live in London, Kingston, or Sao Paulo, it also lives in villages across India's western coast, drumming, dancing, remembering, surviving. So please like, follow, share if you enjoy learning about our beautiful African stories. And tell me in the comments, did you know Africans once ruled parts of India? I love reading your comments. As usual, this is the Africa you're not shown, but I am here to show you.